Hello everyone, my name is John Michael Bushman and welcome back to the Digimon card game. I am personally excited for this one because it's been a while since I last made a video on the Digimon card game, and it's a card game that I still keep up to date in spite not exactly playing it anymore, but I had to get back into it since the new support for Belphemon came out in EX10. Now, noted, this is more for the Japanese ban list side of things. It's very different over there in the West, but there are some similarities between the East and the West when it comes to deck building for this game. So, yeah, similar to last time, the main game plan, get the angriest goat to ever black out of the farmlands of wherever and put him onto the field and hopefully kill your opponent from there. And the new support from EX10 allows him to OTK like never before, and he was already like pretty good at finishing the game, especially when you already get to his rage mode, but he's even better now thanks to the EX10 stuff. So how do you turn this cute little weapon of mass destruction? Don't mind it. Don't mind that he's a weapon of mass destruction created by Akihiro Kurata, because that's like his entire shtick. But yeah, how do you turn this cute little weapon of mass destruction into an even bigger weapon of mass destruction? Well, sit back and relax, because I'm gonna tell you guys why. But we're gonna start off first with the eggs of this deck, and it's just purely Demi-Metamon. 5 copies of it, because you can only have 5 Digi-eggs. So there is that. Having 4 of the one with a on deletion trigger of draw 1, discard 1, and then the one that makes you discard the highest level, or rather a level 5 or higher Digimon from your hand, and then you draw 2. Now, you can have any other purple adjacent Digi-eggs for this for these slots, but for me in particular, having these two is going to be more instrumental compared to everything else, because you don't really digivolve with this deck normally, due to, you know, what I will get to much later. You just use them as fodder for basically everything else, especially for the Proto Gizmon here. And then moving right along to the first of the newer cards in this deck now, the Fascomon. And you can only get him from a promo pack, which you can only get from playing in tournaments. So a little bummed out that you can't exactly get him from packs, so I just bought the copies from other players who have extras of him. So there is that. And he has an on-play or on-deletion ability, where you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you add a card that has Belphemon or Gizmon in its text and add them to your hand. And then you discard 1 card from your hand. And note that it just says it has to have Belphemon or Gizmon in its text. That means stuff like, Belphemon himself, or hell, even Kurata, or the other version of Kurata here. Any card that mentions those 2 Digimon by name is legal to be added to your hand, and you can either keep it there or discard something else, or you can discard the very card that you chose, which honestly is the thing that you will do more often than not, because what you want in this deck in particular, you have to be hand negative for some reason, but you'll know why in a bit. And then we move on to the Gizmons themselves before we move on to everything else. Fascomon starts the chain, and then he does have an inherited effect, but if you're digivolving with this deck, something has gone terribly wrong, because you're never really digivolving with this deck. Because what you'll end up doing, as what you'll see here with the Gizmon, when you would play this card, deleting a level 2 Digimon in the breeding area, you would reduce its cost by 2. So Proto Gizmon here is a play cost 1 card, and it's usually your turn 1 play apart from Fascomon. And you just draw 1 and discard 1. And note that all of the Gizmons cannot digivolve. So why do they do that? Well, I honestly have no idea, but I just basically call these 3 like the trash men, because that's all they ever really do. So there is that. And then all of the Gizmons have a shared on deletion effect, where they would quote unquote digivolve into their higher level form if they are deleted, but you need to return to other Gizmons from the trash to the bottom of the deck, and then you summon the higher level one out. So you need a lot of Gizmons in order to make this deck tick. And speaking of having a lot of Gizmons, we have Gizmon AT, which is honestly the second most important Gizmon in this deck, because it makes you draw 2 and discard 2, and it also only costs 2, not 6. Although of course Psychemon is going to like kill this deck like 3 times over, because it doesn't allow you to reduce play cost, but yeah, we'll get there when we get there. So Similar to Proto Gizmon here, this allows you to go card neutral, or rather, it's more appropriate to call it card selection because you want more stuff in your graveyard than you do in your hand. So there is that. And then the highest one among them, Gizmon XT, which acts as a blocker. And of course, if this guy is deleted, you summon Proto Gizmon back. So it's an entire loop, and then it will eventually come to a point in the game where you would only have Gizmons going in and out of your graveyard and library. And I have had only one game where that was the case, and it was so goddamn grindy, and I don't know how it even got to that point, but yeah. These three Digimon in particular form a very, very surprisingly efficient resource loop. But I'll be honest, it is very slow in today's day and age. We definitely need a better draw engine for the Belphemon deck at this point, because even I struggle to see these cards lasting any longer than they do. And I'm actually honestly surprised that the EX10 support did not include new versions of these guys. But hey, what can we do? And then moving on to the other important Digimon in this deck, we're going to get to Punkmon later on, so bear with me here. We have Astamon. So by deleting one of your other purple Digimon, you can Digivolve into a Digimon card with Belphemon in its name from your hand without paying the cost. So what you would usually do is you sacrifice one of your Gizmons to Astamon here, and then you Digivolve into Sleep Mode, and hopefully by that point, you would have a Rage Mode in the graveyard to put underneath the Sleep Mode. But why would you do that, if you may ask? Well, a shared effect among all of the sleep modes is if you would place a rage mode underneath, directly underneath, by the way, the sleep mode as a material for its Digivolution, sleep mode is basically unaffected by everything. Note that you can still target it, and lingering effects, which is honestly a very tricky thing to resolve both in paper and, you know, if there are still digital simulators out there, it's very tricky to resolve. And you and your opponent basically have to come to an understanding that there are lingering effects that can affect sleep mode as it becomes rage mode, and then there are those that don't. So you have to keep that in mind as you play this deck, and it's honestly the sore spot of this deck in particular, especially if you're not exactly too familiar with this archetype. Sleep mode has two forms now. The main one that you will be using most of the time is still the one from BT13, because by discarding two cards from your hand, you just negate an attack, and it's honestly far more useful compared to the one that you have here from EX10, but because your opponent would need to suspend a Digimon, and then you still discard two cards, and then you suspend two Digimons or Tamers. Now, while this can help in certain situations, having it only as a one-of feels more than enough to me, because it tends to just break up the hand and can actually lead to situations where sometimes this is just a dead card on the field, because it's honestly more of a tech card than anything else. And then moving on to the main win cons of the deck, we have the two versions of Rage Mode here, and we'll get into the X-Antibody in a bit. This is definitely the de facto win con of the deck now, because the inherited effect, we're going to start there first because that's where it all begins. At the end of the opponent's turn, if the top Digivolution card is a Sleep Mode, you just put the sleep mode into the trash. Yeah, you'll get him in a bit. And then you just, he just basically wakes up. That's all what Belphemon does. And then he has two start of main phase effects. You first suspend all of your opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon. And then if you have 6 or fewer cards in hand, this is why you need a lot of draw and discard effects. And usually by the time it gets back around to your turn, you would have about 3 to 4 cards left in hand. And usually it would be either Kuratas or Miss Memory Boost, or hell, even the one of fun of Calling from the Darkness. We'll get to Ruin Mode later. And then he gets Piercing, Security Attack +2, and then 3000 DP. So having a 17,000 attacker that can deal 3 damage, yes, 3 damage, with Piercing, by the way, this can very easily OTK like no other. And then, of course, still on start of main phase, you just delete a suspended Digimon or Tamer. So Tamers have become a lot more versatile and a lot more impactful on the battlefield these days. So a lot of more modern Digimon can now affect Tamers, and this is definitely one of them. And by the way, a lot of the cards in the Belphemon deck all have on play or on deletion effects. So your opponent has to be very careful with who they kill in this deck, because who knows when the Angry Goat will retolerate. Or, wow, did I say retolerate? I should have just said retaliate. Jesus fucking Christ, I cannot English today. But moving right along to the other rage mode, which is the BT13 one, which is the OG that came with the sleep mode, and definitely the weaker of the two rage modes now. But he can still prove its worth because, in my experience with playing this deck, you need at least 10 Belphemon names, and X-Antibody is just a cherry on top, but about 10 Belphemon names are going to be more than enough as you cycle through this deck because it at least guarantees you one Belphemon out of every 5 cards. And definitely 13 is a bit overkill, but I have been finding myself bricking every once in a while. Hell, even with just bricking with just drawing Belphemons in general, but when you would rather have them in the trash, but that's another story. And yeah. As with the OG Rage mode, if you guys remember my deck tech for this deck way back when, he deletes all of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon, and then he gets plus 3000 attack and security attack plus 1. So he swings for 2 damage, and then has an end of attack by deleting another Digimon you control. You unsuspend them, so he basically attacks twice. So for 4 damage total. And moving right along to the now new win con of the deck, we have Belphemon X-Antibody. Again, I have them in all of their alt art glory because it is a very good visual representation of everything that this deck can potentially be, but sadly I'm not made of gold bars. Granted, it is slightly more affordable compared to the other decks in the meta, hint hint. But this deck isn't exactly cutting it, simply because this deck's biggest enemy is itself. As you guys can see, this deck has a very large population of level 5 or higher Digimon, and like I said earlier, you do have a chance of bricking with this deck. Even with all of the draw power that this deck has, you can potentially end up with a hand that is nothing but level 5 or level 6 Digimon, and you have absolutely no way of getting into any of them. You basically have to hard play it and hope to the gods that you survive until the next turn. But moving back to Belphemon X-Antibody, this is the finisher of this deck now, and when you Digivolve into him, yes, he doesn't have an on-play effect, unlike all of the other cards in this deck. You delete all of your opponent's Digimon with the highest level, so usually the level 5s or level 6s, sometimes even level 7s, as with, Shine Greymon here. And then if you have a card with Belphemon in its name, in its Digivolution cards, he attacks without suspending. So he attacks immediately upon Digivolving. So that's a little mechanic that hasn't exactly been keyworded yet, according to the more entrenched players in the shop I work at. But he basically attacks twice, like basically for free. And then he also has Rush and Piercing, so he just attacks right away without much problem. And then at the end of the attack, he can, if you somehow you did not kill your opponent, you can safely retreat back into sleep mode. Although the other quote-unquote combo that you can do is, thanks to the new Kurata here, you can Digivolve into Belphemon X-Antibody from a Rage mode, and then you use his end of attack to Digivolve into a Sleep mode, but you do not activate his on-play or when Digivolving effect, so that you can Digivolve into an X-Antibody from your hand to hopefully finish your opponent off. And that is the OTK right there. And it's enabled solely by the new Kurata. But why do I only have 3 copies of him? Well, he is a brick otherwise. The old Kurata is still far better because it allows you to cycle through your deck and also acts as removal. So, yeah. Now we move on to the tech cards, and the first up here is Punkmon. This is just an upgraded version of Dobermon, because apart from just giving blocker, it also gives retaliation and also lets you discard 1 card from your hand, which this deck very much appreciates. And retaliation is a keyword, a relatively new keyword, at least by the time I'm returning to the game. Basically, if a Digimon blocks, the Digimon that attacked it will also die. So that's why Punkmon is a very large upgrade over Dobermon, which just gives the Digimon the keyword blocker. So there is that. Then moving to the other tech card here. I mean, it still boggles my mind that Shine Greymon Ruin Mode is a tech card, but he does have a very nifty ability where until the end of your opponent's turn, all of your opponent's Digimon get minus 5,000 DP. So your opponent basically cannot play anything that is level 4 or lower, although some level 4s can survive, but basically anything level 3 will not survive on the field for the opponent's turn. So this is more of a turn skip than anything else. And then he does have a nifty end of attack trigger. And hell, in desperate situations, if you don't have many cards in hand and you only have Ruin Mode left, you can Digivolve into Ruin Mode from Belphemon X-Antibody. So, because Shine Greymon Ruin Mode is a level 7, and Belphemon only caps out at level 6. So, and the other one here is 7 penetration. I don't know why it had to reach 7 penetrations in order to do its job, but that's a joke for the adults in this room. Anyway, this acts more as a repeatable form of removal in this deck, which is insane. But if you would Digivolve into an X-Antibody, he just straight up deletes something on the board because your opponent's Digimon needs to have a level that's high or higher than the number of cards in your hand, and usually that would be active, especially at this point. And yeah, it just straight up deletes something, and then it even recycles its freaking self, which is insane, especially if it's in your trash. So this is an insane card, and it definitely replaces the other deletion spell that this deck used to have, and this is just far better at this point. And then the other tech cards that are in this deck is Calling from the Darkness, one of fun of. This just acts as recovery, and like no questions asked. There's a reason this thing is limited to one because it gave purple decks way too much grind game that other decks simply cannot catch up to. Miss Memory Boost is in this deck because it allows you to go card neutral basically, because you use the card itself, or rather, it's at a -1. I'm not sure which one, but it allows you to draw one card and also trash 2 cards from your deck. So it's basically a draw 3 for this deck in particular. And then gaining 2 memory is not nothing, but until you realize that if you would evolve Belphemon into its X-Antibody form, it costs 2 memory. And wouldn't you know it, Miss Memory Boost gives you 2 memory. So if you need to finish the game, you need to have at least Miss Memory Boost on the field. And of course, bonus points because we have Lilithmon in the art here. And then of course, the 2 Kuratas here. The OG Kurata just lets you draw one, discard one, and then if you would place him as the bottom Digivolution card of a Digimon with Belphemon in its name, you just delete a level 6 Digimon on the board. And then the often forgotten effect that this guy has, if you would Digivolve if you just play rather a Belphemon on the board, you just delete a Gizmon and then you reduce the cost by the play cost of the Gizmon that you sacrifice. And preferably, you would sacrifice the Gizmon XT here so that your Belphemon sleep mode is just going to cost 2 memory. It's an effect that comes in clutch every once in a while, but usually if things are going right, you're never really going to pay too much attention to the first sentence here. And then, of course, the newer Kurata here, it's a memory setter, which is an absolute mandatory thing in decks these days. And then he has an end of turn effect, which allows you to basically OTK with X-Antibody. And yeah, that is it for my Belphemon deck tech upgrades. And will this deck crack to the top of the meta? Unfortunately, no, because like I said, this deck's biggest enemy is itself. And if you draw into the cards in the wrong sequence, you will just end up bricking. But otherwise, this deck is very fun and will definitely catch people off guard, especially if they're unprepared for it, especially for sleep modes, being unaffected by a lot of shit. And that can, give some people some pause. And the amount of removal that this deck surprisingly has can also catch a lot of hell, even meta players off guard if they're not exactly prepared for it. But yeah, if the deck bricks, then that's just par for the course because of just how high level a lot of its cards are. But yeah, it's a very fun deck to play, and it's just worth busting out a German farm boy accent every once in a while because it's a goat. Why else wouldn't you act like a farm boy? So if you guys like what you saw, hit like, comment, subscribe, and share this among your friends. And until next time, toodles.